First of all, thanks for bearing with us. It's 5:15 on a Thursday. I don't know how we got the graveyard shift, but here we are. My name is Peter FitzGibbon. I'm the General Manager of the Google Solution Line here at Insight. Listen, I think we've all, we're here to dispel that AI is just magic, right? I think everybody here has built some agents or built some chatbots, but very few people have built an agent like these guys and their teams have built. For a person that may be having the worst day of their life because they're dialing 911, or a student that's flustered because they're trying to figure out how to change courses. So excited to share some stories here with the guys here in a minute. So we've kind of seen this idea that we're being forced to choose between, is it innovation without security or is it scale without speed? And we're kind of going to dispel that. We're going to talk a little bit about the strategic engineering we've done with these guys here. So let's build an AI system that's secure and reliable in a zero-tolerance world. So how do you build the plumbing and the architecture for this type of thing? So I'm thrilled to be joined by my esteemed guests here, who we've met 1,400 times preparing for this session. Narayanan here on my right, on my left, sorry, is the Global CIO of Strategic Education, and Chad is the VP of Emergency Services at FitzGibbon. Okay, my team is sitting in the front. Okay, so guys, let's set the stage. Can you give us the context of your businesses and kind of a little bit of background? So Narayanan, we'll start with you.
Hi, nice joining you guys in this evening. I work for Strategic Education, Inc. We are one of the largest online education businesses in America. We have two big universities. One is called Capella University, another one is Strayer University in the US, and we have a couple of universities in Australia and New Zealand. We support about 150,000 students globally, online, mostly doing higher education. So online education is DNA. That's where I come from.
Awesome. Chad.
Hi. As Peter mentioned, I'm Chad Brothers. I work for a company called FitzGibbon. FitzGibbon provides operator services and directory assistance for most of the large major telcos. In addition to that, we provide emergency services for things like in-purse devices or overflow calls for 911 centers and things of that nature.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Chad, because some of these stats, and I've got them written down because they're so interesting. First of all, in retail, if a bot fails, you get a coupon or you get a discount, right? But in your business, it's a life and safety issue. And something I didn't realize was that 60% of calls are non-emergency, people asking about the weather, are schools closed, which is a regular thing in my house when snow falls in Texas. But the industry standard in your field is basically don't do AI. It's too risky. So what changed?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And to really put it into context, we kind of step back a little bit and say there's 600 million calls a year arrive in 911 emergency communication centers. 40% of those are emergency calls, and as Peter mentioned, the other 60% are non-emergency calls. And so really the premise for us even getting to this technology and addressing it with AI was understanding what that problem was. And these centers are historically 30 to 40% understaffed. And so if you think about how to create a solution for that, we weren't able to do that with policy or process. We needed something more to get us over the edge of solving that staffing crisis problem. And to do that, really that opened the door for AI, which traditionally would be very third rail in the public safety space, especially when you're dealing with 911 communications.
That's awesome. Narayanan, you said 150,000 students?
Yes.
Okay, so when we started our phase 1 strategy together, you were dealing with some older chatbots, dialogue flow type stuff, a whole bunch of manual processes. What was the operational bottleneck that got you to kind of pause, decide let's not patch what we have, but actually rebuild from scratch?
It's a good question. By virtue of our business, which is wholly online, we collect enormous digital footprint.
Yeah.
And the data, it's not so much that we want to go and not patch old systems, but what we do inherently is create a lot of friction in the system because of its legacy nature and the lack of orchestration of data. So when we wanted to start using agentic frameworks, we said, okay, let's get the data cohesiveness together first. Luckily, we had all our data gravity on GCP, which was built over the years. So it made logical sense to step back, pause, get the context right, and then don't patch legacy, just upgrade to the latest and greatest so that we can start building a sophisticated orchestrator on top of it. That was the rationale when we went that way.
I've met with you now a couple of times, not afraid to drive change in your organization to make sure these things happen, and I think it's definitely a feature of your leadership that made this happen. So Chad, let's get into the weeds a little bit. So we engineered a defense in depth architecture. It included a safety valve concept, right? So what does that mean, and around kind of like if the AI confidence drops below like a 3 nines level?
Yeah, I think this is really one of the things, going back to your previous question, right? How do we get over that hump with AI adoption? And there's really no room for failure in 911 communications. There's zero tolerance in failure, which can become a pretty difficult technical hurdle to overcome. And so, when we partnered with your engineering teams, one of the very first things that we set up front was, how do we use this technology, this customer engagement suite, how do we deploy conversational AI in a manner that really will allow us to showcase the generative AI aspect of it, but also put a guardrail in place so that we have an off-ramp. Yeah. If that confidence level in the generative AI portion of this solution isn't meeting the mark, right? Maybe the data is wrong. Maybe the intent understanding is not right. We need to have that safety valve that we can get this call to a human. And so what we did was we prioritized using playbooks and conversational AI with that generative approach, but then we put a parallel path in there with deterministic, so that anytime we got close to those guardrails, we knew that call was going to get put to a human telecommunicator, a trained 911 telecommunicator. So if you think about that in the context of someone is calling a line that is not 911, but perhaps they still actually have a situation that requires emergency response, like, there's a population segment in the United States that doesn't want to burden emergency services. They don't think that they need, a 911 call, but they may be actually having a heart attack. We needed that deterministic flow that was going to pick that up and immediately prioritize that to a human queue, as opposed to trying to give a generative response about what a heart attack.
Yeah, you can't really tell people.
Right.
Start asking questions. Do you have a pain in your left hand when they're having a heart attack? You want to get them to talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So that safety off ramp was a critical element in designing.
So I'm going to pick up one thing, because this comes up a lot. Customer Engagement Suite, CS, you mentioned, is now being rebranded as Gemini Enterprise for Customer Experience. So if anyone following along the keynotes, that's the underlying product that we're using. The art is formerly known as CCAI, and it might have been called something else beforehand. So that's the follow on where we're going.
Right. Conversational agents, dialogue flow, all of those things.
All of those things. This is AI that's been kind of tried and trusted for a while, and obviously we use in your situations. So Narayanan, huge estate to modernize. You talked about that a little bit, the amount of data you had. We spent 14 weeks designing golden pathways, like our standardized infrastructure, on GKE, Cloud Run, etc. What was the critical moment that you decided to pause and build the architectural platform first, versus just starting migrating out the gate?
Yeah, one of the philosophies that we enshrined while moving to Google Cloud Platform from our legacy is to ensure it's just not taking the legacy applications as is and then shifting to a new house. Yeah. Our focus was to make our applications cloud ready. We wanted to be deliberate in re-architecting, retiring, and replacing systems in a very meaningful way. So we said we will take time to set the architectural frameworks right. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to see how the patterns are all designed. Though it takes a little longer initially to set those patterns, but following a golden pathway, I would say actually accelerated the moves later. What we decided was, okay, we're going to take time, design these things in a very deliberate manner, set the standards so that all other application moves could just follow the template.
Okay.
That's the reason we took the time to do those things right, because it's a big move and we wanted to get that right from the get-go. We didn't want to come back and reconcile many of these things later.
So you went from that then, and this is where the money starts meeting the road, or the rubber meets the road. You built 2 pilots, right? One course registration pilot, I'm assuming, helping students find the right courses, or picking courses between semesters. The other was an agent email assist pilot. So how did seeing those in the wild and the real data for those influence your steering committee? Because you have a boss too that you kind of got to convince. I think that's the money man in your business. Convince you to go to the next phase, or convince them to go to the next phase.
See, we took the most meaningful use cases and said, you know what, in our business, every course people register is going to be very meaningful for us.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make it as friction-free as possible and create a lot of self-help, so that we are trying to show the value of these kinds of sophisticated agentic play. So when we tested that, it was pretty easy to convince how people are entering and making it a little more seamless.
Yeah.
So that's why we were very deliberate about picking the right use cases to apply first, and show some quick wins in that.
Yeah, you just think like 150,000 students that can now self-serve.
Yep.
Versus, what was it before? Calling up and actually going through some process.
Well, we have some lofty goals, right? I mean, give or take, you're talking about 150,000 students who are taking courses, right? But if you talk at the upper funnel, we get hundreds of thousands prospects every month, applicants, and so you are handling all those calls and other things. Our goal is to just not handle those calls and make it self-service as possible, and mobile first with an agentic workflow in the future.
And I don't know how many of y'all have got college-age kids, but they don't like talking to people. They like do things on phones. So like self-service was like it's exactly what they wanted.
College-age kids, I never thought I'll be so antisocial. I don't want to talk to people. I'm just kidding, but I want to just use conversational AI.
Yeah, you just want to, you want to get it done. You want to get it done.
Yeah.
So here's some of the big outcomes that I love, and we've done press releases on this, and this is really excites me because this is delivering true outcomes. So you saw a 6% reduction in non-emergency call times, and 98.8% accuracy in the calls that got through. So, like, that's huge. Like, that's massive. So, like, let's talk about that.
Well, it was more than we expected. I just didn't realize that the intent matching with the playbooks was going to be so accurate that we could align it up that well. So it was quite more than what we anticipated.
What would have been good? What did good look like?
For me, I think what would have been good was a 70% level. So to be able to intent match at that level was shocking. It gave us a whole lot of confidence being able to appropriately address the types of scenarios that we were going to see, right? And to your other metric, being able to reduce those call times. If you think about having an understaffed agency and being on a call, no one wants to sit on hold. You definitely don't want to sit on hold when you're calling about an emergency or a situation that is affecting your livelihood. So being able to reduce those call times by offloading that to an agent, keeping the humans that are highly trained to deal with emergencies focused on emergencies, it really was a twofold benefit, right? Those emergency call answer times went down because folks were available and in queues. And the non-emergency folks that needed information or assistance were able to get that quicker because they didn't have to wait in line either.
So I'm going to go on a tangent versus what's been on the questions that we've prepared for. But how did that impact the actual call center staff? Like the humans that do this every day versus, I can imagine it's a pretty stressful job.
It is, right? So, I mean, we're all affected by context switching all day long too, whether you're switching between your Instagram or your Reddit page or whatever. Like, there's a tangible toll for us. Now, think about that when you are working in that call center and you're going from someone who's asking, how to do CPR over the phone to the next call you get, someone is asking why their garbage didn't get picked up. That alone drives a lot of stress to these call takers. So when we were able to keep them focused on one thing, we could tell that there was there's direct positive impact to mental health. Take away some of those extraneous tasks, and then you start to address retention and things like that. And ultimately, what you find is perhaps maybe you're actually staffed right because you're doing the right things with the people that you've staffed. You've taken all of these other ancillary things that have built up over time in mission creep, and you've handed those to the bots.
Yeah.
and let them work those things.
What do you think the future looks like? When I think of this suite of tools, think of like moving from multimodal, going from like being on a call to moving to text, moving to video. How do you see this evolving for you?
Well, those things are already starting to make their way into the public safety space for callers, providing that information and context. I think it's another tool. It's definitely coming. The adoption rate of that is slow, but public safety is pretty slow to adopt things in the 911 center. They're in that generally they're in that if it's not broke, don't fix it mode.
Yeah, don't break anything.
But it will. It definitely will find its way into the space.
Okay. Narayanan, how impact on the people that were taking calls before in your organization? How do they like this change?
Well, change is always difficult, but we are trying to, what I call as cognitive reinvestment. How can they reinvest their time on some higher value tasks? We are being very deliberate about moving our people along and bringing them to different kinds of work that they can do, right? That's the angle. But I want to tag on what you said. We are seeing a huge context switch in terms of where people need to be met. They want to switch from text to voice to video to even in learning, right? Multimodality is going to be the way. There is not going to be an asynchronous or a synchronous video. I would like to listen to a podcast, but then switch it over to a textbook in an ebook format, and then switch back to a podcast based on where I am and how I am going. I think the same way people want to, right from lead to prospect to applicant, they are switching between text, conversational chat, and doing things on a mobile as well as coming to some kind of a agentic voice automated interaction. That's where we are seeing, and we are educating our workforce on this path and paradigm shift. But it's the early stages, right? So we'll have to see how meaningfully we can take them away and then put them in higher value tasks. That's work in progress. There is some anxiety, but we are working on it.
Yeah. Chad, so obviously it's fantastic technology, bedrock that you build this on, but how did you find partnering with Insight to actually drive the change management and the adoption, and how do you think we work together as a force multiplier to make this happen faster and better?
Well, for us, we've been working in call centers for years, but we're not an AI-first company yet, right? So for us, it was really instrumental to bring in a team that had those chops and the skills that they could bring to the table for us to take that call center strategy, that idea. When we think about public safety space, 911 centers, they're highly specialized contact centers, right? And so when you want to pair that AI up to it, we needed a team that could bring to table for us the expertise and the knowledge to mold that AI strategy into that contact center framework. And that's where Insight did it. Used the right term. They were a force multiplier for us. I've got great developers, but I need skills that I don't always have on tap. And that's when Insight really was instrumental in helping us stretch.
And for our team, and I've heard this actually about your business as well, I know the success when they start talking about this is our project, not like your project. They're like collectively feel responsibility for delivering the outcome. And honestly, we all have to explain to loved ones and parents about what we do and be able to tell them, like, I'm working on a 911 system to drive this sort of change. It's pretty powerful, really. So I think everyone that worked on our project from our side was really excited about it. What about yourself? How did we help in this force multiplier? I know there were some fits and starts with some other folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had a different kind of experience. We went to Google as a platform of choice 2 years ago, signed a contract, had no illusion that we had the expertise inside. So I picked up the phone, went to the Google rep and said, hey, you need to give us some recommendations on implementation partners. And I used the word partner very deliberately. And we had a false start with the partner. And our team was really quick in kind of assessing that. We said, okay, we parted ways. It was ended with the first date. And then we said, okay, we'll go to the next partner. And then that's where we found Insight. Very insightful for us, rightfully. I think we never turned back. The reason I'm using and stretching on the word partnership, I think Insight brought the right kind of attitude and partnership, thought leadership. You taught us how to start moving. There was a lot of learning that we developed from working with the professionals in your team. And it's been growing. It's been a very enriching experience. In fact, like I mentioned in many of the forums, I have heard great things. And the outcome is we are seeing Insights get inroads to many other substreams of work that we are trying to. So though it started as an infrastructure, as a migration project, but now I am getting more requests from my teams to come and say, hey, can we pull Insight into this and that? So that itself is a demonstration of how Insight has been a force multiplier for us.
Awesome. Makes me smile when the teams are coming to you saying they want to work with us to be able to convince you about it. So I did an article last week and I was talking about like 2024 and 2025, there was a lot of tire kicking around AI, and you guys really got beyond that and got stuff into production and showed some real value. For those that are in the room that are probably stuck maybe at the earlier stage in a pilot purgatory and kind of don't know where to get to, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them on where to go? So I'll start with you, Narayanan.
Yeah, I think getting the data right is going to be the most important thing. When I say data, it's not just raw data in the data lake. I think all the knowledge sources and orchestrating them or assembling them in very meaningful terms is going to be the most important thing. I think that's where we are learning a lot and spending a lot of time, because the context that you build around that is going to be the core engine that's going to propel how you are going to start leveraging AI and agentic workflow. If we don't get that right, no matter what, however you want to drive fast on the highway, it's going to break down somewhere. So spend time, get the data right, and put the context right, and normalize it before we start any agentic AI project.
And you had your golden pathways as well.
And the frameworks and the architecture, right?
So you can't just jump straight in, but it didn't take a ton of time.
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. And that was really our experience as well. Like I said earlier, we really wanted to lead with the playbook strategy in generative AI as opposed to deterministic, right? Anybody can build an IVR that will help you navigate.
I haven't heard of IVR in a while.
Right, yeah. And so we wanted to really showcase that AI piece. And what we found, at least in our segment, in our vertical, was that the customers that we worked with didn't have a real great strategy around creating or come to the table with us with a lot of data. So that's something that we lead with when we start initiatives with our customers to say, okay, we need to spend some time making sure that the data that you want in terms of outcomes is available, and if it's not, let's get a strategy to create it, because otherwise, your AI is only going to be as good as the data that you train it with. So.
Okay. Appreciate all those insights. Appreciate you guys taking the time to have a chat with me about kind of real world outcomes in some serious situations, right? These are not simple businesses you guys run.